Chapter 11. The Winter Sleep. Mr. Henry had taken such a liking to Striped Coat that he wanted to make sure the wild wood pussy would like the cabin well enough to make it a permanent home. With this in mind, he built an underground drain leading under it to a pile of stones nearby. Safety was even more important than comfort in the matter of a den, and through this back door Striped Coat could feel able to go or come when he chose. The stone pile hid the entrance and allowed no animal larger than he to enter through its cracks. It was a fine arrangement, and Striped Coat liked it. He built a big nest of dry grass, leaves, and cotton waste under the cabin and slept there instead of in his corner back of the woodbox, but at night he often came out of the hole in the floor and walked around the room while Mr. Henry was eating supper, showing friendliness but in a dignified, distant way. After eating a few scraps, he would go back to the hole, then out through the drain to the stone pile, around which he would walk for a time, scenting the air and making very sure all was well before leaving for the woods. He was growing bigger and finer every day. By the time the frosts of October had turned the leaves red, sweetened the acorns, and numbed the big insects so that they were more easily caught, his winter coat of fur to keep him warm in the coming icy weather was almost at its full prime, long, almost like velvet in softness, and black as coal, yet so glossy that it fairly glittered in the sunlight. On his head and neck stood out the pretty white markings which had given him his name. His hunts in the woods now were wonderful picnics. In the grassy spots he could find big, full-grown grasshoppers and crickets, as well as luscious white grubs which dry weather had brought up within an inch or two of the surface of the ground. Around the grapevine tangles and under the persimmon and wild apple trees he picked up ripe fruit often shaken down by possum, and under the white oaks acorns almost as sweet as chestnuts, while many other plants, bushes, vines, and trees bore edible things which he liked, such as tubers, berries, or seeds. He found many mice, too, in their nests of grass, and more yellowjacket and bumblebee combs than he could eat. No wonder, therefore, that he was able to store up a lot of surplus food in the form of fat, to help him live through the coming winter when bad weather might keep him from finding more food for weeks at a time. It is well that autumn is a time of plenty, for in the north it enables the animals and even some birds which do not migrate to the warm south to gather much more food than they need at the moment. When the cold winds blow and the ground is frozen, it is badly needed. Red squirrel hid nuts in forks of limbs and in hollows and crevices. Gray squirrel buried a supply in good safe places. Ground hackey made a granary for himself underground. The foxes buried things like dead mice, pieces of rabbit, frogs, snakes, fish, and even apples, but creatures like bear, woodchuck, possum, coon, and Striped Coat just stored, in layers of rich fat around their body, enough nourishment to carry them through the hard months, until warm, pleasant days came. Those that were not wise enough to gather a supply in some form had a terrible time and often died before spring. As Mr. Henry kept open house at the cabin every Sunday, it was usual for at least one canoe party of his family and friends to come for luncheon, and to walk around the interesting woods. But more interesting to them than anything else was an occasional glimpse of Striped Coat, who, though usually sleeping in the daytime, was waked up by the new voices and often induced to come out for a dainty piece of meat or fish. The friendliness of this beautiful and entirely free creature of the woods delighted many a visitor. When really cold weather set in, Mr. Henry prepared to leave the cabin until spring, so he anxiously watched Striped Coat, in the hope that before leaving time came, the wood pussy would hibernate, that is to say, go to sleep for the winter in the safe, warm nest. His fat would feed him while he slept, for without exercise he would not need much nourishment. The woods were well sprinkled with traps, and a snow for tracking might come at any time, and help Farmer Sloane or other woodsmen to locate his den and set the traps more dangerously unless he was guarded. At length a very cold day came, and Striped Coat could be heard remodeling his nest and digging energetically. Mr. Henry watched for him, and was surprised once or twice to see the head of an entirely strange wood pussy thrust out of the hole in the floor as it looked around. What it was hunting for was soon shown by Striped Coat, who presently came out and began dragging at the rug as if to carry it away with him. "Ah, so that's it," thought the watcher. "You have brought in a friend to stay with you, and need more covers to make him comfortable. Well, you shall have them." And as often as Striped Coat came up, he was handed a ball of cotton waste. Soon he appeared no more, and all was quiet except for the sighing of the north wind outside. Striped Coat had gone comfortably to sleep, and with him, as in the days when he was little, was his mother.